السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. حياكم الله جميعا، مساكم الله بالخير. شكرا لانضمامكم لإحدى محاضرات فيجيلنس الإدارية. والليلة عندنا محاضرنا كين فيليبس من الولايات المتحدة في موضوع جدا مهم، ألا وهو ال Predictive Learning Analytics PLA. هو مطور النظرية. يعني الآن راح نتكلم باللغة الإنجليزية، كون المحاضرة باللغة الإنجليزية، فإذا اسمحوا لي راح يعني أغير اللغة الإنجليزية. Thank you very much for joining tonight. This webinar organized by Visions Consulting in coordination with Phillips Associates in the United States. And our guest tonight is Ken Phillips. He is the architect and the developer of the Predictive Learning Analytics methodology. Let me introduce Ken. Ken is the founder and CEO of Phillips Associates and the creator and the chief architect of the Predictive Learning Analytics PLA learning evaluation methodology. He has more than 30 years experience designing learning assessments and has authored more than a dozen published learning instruments. Ken also regularly speaks to ATD groups, university classes, and corporate L&D groups. Since 2008, he has presented at the ATD International Conference, and since 2013 at the annual training conference and expo on management and evaluation of learning topics. He's also a regular speaker at the ATD Core 4 conferences and has presented at 4 ATD global conferences. Ken Phillips delivers all programs and workshops in his signature style: professional, engaging, and approachable. Ken, the mic is yours. Without further ado, please go ahead, and the mic is yours.
Thank you, Kamal. You read it just like I wrote it for you. So.
I want to change. This is your words.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And you were perfectly welcome to edit any of that I had written. So
I think that will.
Well, good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us and talking about predictive learning analytics. This is you might be familiar with the term predictive analytics because it's been a fairly hot topic in the corporate world for a short while now, for several years. And a lot of organizations, especially larger corporations, are using predictive analytics to do things like they use it in sales, where they are trying to predict what their best customers are likely to do down the road in terms of placing orders. And they also use it in, for example, HR, where they use predictive analytics to look at things like voluntary turnover and looking at how many, which people in the company are likely to voluntarily leave, and so that they can engage those employees if they want to keep them in the organization, engage those employees in conversations to help them in their job to better align, their career goals with their current job and future jobs they might have. But one area that it hasn't been used in at all until now with this predictive learning analytics is learning and development. And so we've always had lots of metrics in learning and development that were generally focused around the 5 levels of evaluation: the level 1 reaction, and level 2 learning, and level 3 behavior, and level 4 business results, and level 5 ROI, or return on investment. But that's all, for the most part, data that is collected, or metrics that are collected, that are what I call backward looking, because we're assessing after the training program, kind of what happened and did people like it? Did they learn something? Did they apply it? If they applied it, did it improve business results? And if it improved business results, was the investment, did it have a positive investment of ROI? So predictive learning analytics is kind of taking that whole idea around predictive analytics and applying it to learning. So you're going to see how we can incorporate predictive analytics in learning during this session. So that's kind of just a little bit of background. Let me get this. There we go. So let me just quickly run through the agenda. So after attending the session, you'll have be able to or have a clear understanding about the impact scrap learning has on wasted organizational resources and lost credibility with business executives. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time at the beginning talking about this whole area of scrap learning. I'm going to share a case study with you. This was a couple years ago, where we used the predictive learning analytics methodology. So all the data that I'm going to show you around these 5 key metrics, the 2 predictive and 3 descriptive, we'll talk about the actions that this company took to mitigate or eliminate scrap learning and increase training transfer. So that's basically the agenda and what we're going to focus on. Let me get the things working again here. There we go. To get us started, let me just ask you, you can just type in the chat here, yes or no. Tell me in the chat, yes or no, are you familiar with the term scrap learning? Have you heard about that before? I'd just like to know how many of you have heard that. No, 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 okay. No, no, no. Okay, no, no. No, no, okay. Okay, we got lots of no's. Okay, well, great. So you're in the right spot then, because we're going to talk about the scrap learning and that impact on L&D. So here's a definition for scrap learning, and so it's a term that describes the gap or the difference between learning or training that's delivered but not applied back on the job. Another way to think about it is it's the flip side of training transfer. So whenever we deliver a training program, we're going to end up with the content that was covered in the training, some of which will be applied back in the job and some of which won't. And so if it's applied back on the job, it's called training transfer. If it's not applied back on the job but was covered during the training program, that's called scrap learning. And the term was coined by a guy you might be familiar with, Roy Pollock, who is the CEO of the 6Ds company. And he used to work in the for a pharmaceutical company and was doing training in their manufacturing area. And where he became very familiar with scrap there because they were tracking how much scrap had, when they were producing these various medicines and things. And if they didn't meet the quality standards, they ended up throwing them out. And so that was considered scrap. So when Roy got into training and moved away from the pharmaceutical company and formed this 6Ds company, he coined that term scrap learning to apply to learning and development, and it came out of his experience with manufacturing. And so next, what I'd like to do is just add a quick poll here. So in the average organization, what percent of the learning that's delivered do you think ends up not being applied back on the job or ends up as scrap learning? And again, you can just type in the chat either A, B, C, or D. B, C, D, okay. B, C, D, might be C, okay. Okay, so nobody picked A, it doesn't look like. And that's good. So this is the type of multiple choice test question you always wished you had in school, because there are 3 correct answers. So if you had picked 45%, 65%, or 85%, that would be a correct answer. And if you had picked 25%, which I don't think anybody did, that would have been an incorrect answer. So let's talk a little bit more about scrap learning and talk about these percentages and what impact it has for us as L&D professionals. So let's talk a little bit about how big the problem is. We kind of have a general idea based on that previous poll, but let me tell you, give you some background about where those numbers came from. This was a benchmark study that was done in 2014, and it was done by a company called Knowledge Advisors, which is a software company here in the US. You may know them by the product that they created, which is a software measurement and evaluation tool called Metrics That Matter. Many large corporations use that software tool, that Metrics That Matter software tool, to automate their measurement and evaluation of learning process. And so what Knowledge Advisors did in 2014 was went into the back end of the system, and they had, literally thousands of customers that were using this tool to automate their evaluation efforts. And so they went into the back end and looked at all of the data that they had collected, and there were tens of thousands of data points. And what they found when they analyzed it was that in the average organization, 45% of all training or learning that gets delivered ends up as scrap. In other words, it ends up, not being applied back on the job. Another study was done by, actually, there were 2 studies, and you'd see at the bottom of the slide, there's a guy by the name of Rob Brinkerhoff, and he was a professor in the Graduate School of Human Resource Development at a university here in the US. And what he did is he had 2 graduate students, one in 2004 and one in 2008, who co-authored 2 different research studies that looked at the whole issue of scrap learning and or the flip side of a training transfer. And what he found in both these studies, and they were remarkably similar, even though they were 2 completely different companies, 2 completely different training programs, but the results he came up with were remarkably similar. And what he found was that in these 2 cases, slightly more than 15% of the learners who attended these training programs that he researched actually went back and applied the new skills that they learned back on the job. So a little more didn't even try to apply the new skills back on the job. So that in this case, these were face-to-face training programs. So they came to the training, they ate the donuts, they ate the cookies, but when they got back on the job, they made no attempt whatsoever to apply any of the new things they learned. And then he found that there was this middle group of 65% who actually, when they left the training program, their hearts were in the right spot. So they went back, they intended to apply the things that they had learned in the training. But when they got back on the job, what happened was within 30 days or less, they ended up reverting back to their old ways. And so if you add the the slightly less than 20% who did absolutely nothing, made no attempt to apply anything, together with the 65% who went back and tried to apply what they learned, but reverted back to their old ways in 30 days or less. You add those two together and you come up with 85% scrap learning in these two research studies that Rob Brinkerhoff did. I've got 3 clients that I've worked with here in the last couple of years who've applied this predictive learning analytics methodology to training programs that they were offering. And let me just share those results with you. This first one here was a medical insurance company here in the US. And the program that they were implementing was a continuous process improvement program. And it was for a bunch of call center employees that worked in the call center. And what we found was when we collected data for this program is that 64% of the learners that attended this program didn't apply the information they learned in this training program back on the job for a variety of reasons. And this is the case study that I'm going to show you. So you'll see all the reasons why this number came out like it did. The second one here was this is a commercial property management company that was in Japan. And they were implementing a leadership development program for mid-level kind of managers who, were on the fast track to move into executive roles as senior executives retired. And so when we took a look at this program, this leadership development program, 54% of it ended up as scrap learning or not being applied back on the job. And the last one was a water utility company, and this was in the UK. And they were implementing a developing personal resilience training program for all their employees. The company was going through a bunch of culture changes, and so what they wanted to do was to provide all their employees with some tools to better manage and this whole culture change process they were going through. And so what we found with this training program was 48% of it ended up as scrap. So if you take and add those, the knowledge advisors, the Brinkerhoff, and my 3 research studies there, if you average those, add them together, the average scrap learning figure is around 60%. So that's why if you picked any one of those 3 choices that we talked about earlier and saw on the poll, the 45, 65, or 85, those were all going to be correct answers. So what does this mean in wasted money and time? Because scrap learning, it translates into wasted money and time because if people don't apply it, they wasted their time in the training. And obviously that costs money. So to help gain a better understanding of that, what I took was 2 pieces of data from the ATD 2021 State of the Industry Report. And ATD does one of these annually, and they survey companies, across the world and collect all this data. And so you can look at these reports, on an annual basis and see what has changed from one year to the next. But the 2 statistics that I took to show you the impact that scrap learning has is the average direct learning expenditure per employee, which, as you can see here, was in 2021. The 2021 State of the Industry Report is based on 2020 data that they collected. So the year of the report is always reporting the previous year's data. But the average direct learning expenditure per employee in the 2021 State of the Industry Report, $1,267. And the average number of learning hours consumed per employee was 35. So this is based, across the world, all the organizations that participated in this research. And so if you take those 2 numbers and you multiply the 1,267 times 60% scrap learning, $760 out of that 1,267 ends up as scrap. That's wasted money. That's money that was spent that the organizations got no value from. And in terms of the 35 hours, if you multiply that times 60%, you come up with 21 hours that translate into scrap learning. So that was 21 hours out of the 35 that was simply wasted time. So I think that brings us to this slide, which is clearly, at least in my mind, L&D, we have a problem here and we need to address this. And so the solution is what we're going to be talking about now going forward is this whole thing called predictive learning analytics, which is this methodology that I've created that Kamal mentioned and have been working on, and it's been a evolving process for the last several years. So that's what we're going to be focusing on next. So the definition of predictive learning analytics is that it's a methodology for bridging the learning application gap by using 5 key metrics to pinpoint the underlying causes of scrap learning associated with a training program or a learning program. So we're going to actually collect data that will identify the causes or the reasons behind why the scrap learning figure is what it is. And then that data will provide us with a platform for taking targeted corrective actions so that we can begin to measure and monitor and manage that amount of scrap learning. So that's the whole definition here. The mission behind the predictive learning analytics methodology is to provide L&D professionals, folks like us, with a process that moves their evaluation efforts from measurement into management by using data to measure, monitor, and manage training transfer. So as I said earlier at the beginning, the traditional 5-level evaluation model is terrific and provides lots of useful information. But what happens is it's all backward looking. So we're looking at what's happened after the training is been done. And so with this process, moves the evaluation efforts from just pure measurement to management so that we can start taking corrective action to improve training transfer. So this is the model that I created of the predictive learning analytics methodology. And you can see that it has 3 phases here. Phase 1 is, as you can see here, all around collecting data, and it's pinpointing the underlying causes of scrap learning using these 5 key metrics that we're going to talk about here in a second. So just think of phase 1 as data collection and analysis. So we're gathering all the data that we need in order to take us to phase 2, where we're going to start identifying and implementing and managing corrective actions to improve training transfer. So the data analysis and collection up at phase 1 gives us the data we need to take to phase 2. And then the last phase is after we've implemented these targeted corrective actions, we want to collect our results and report the results to the businesses and the business executives we're supporting and deliver the results as a story, which we'll talk a little bit about at the end of the session here. I want you to know that the methodology sits on a foundation of 3 research-based training transfer components and 15 research-based training transfer factors. So all the things we're going to be talking about going forward here are all based on science. It's not stuff that I just created and dreamed up or theory or whatever, but it's all based on science. And so that's important to understand that and know that. So there's 3 training transfer components that research has found that contribute to training transfer. The first one of these is the learning program design. That's probably no big surprise to any of you, because we know that that how well we design the training program is going to have a direct impact on the amount of training transfer that occurs. But there are two other components that also play an important role in training transfer that receive a lot less attention. And the second one is learner mindset. That's the mindset that the learners have after they leave the training. And we'll talk about what some of those elements are that are associated with learner mindset here in just a second. And then the third one is the learner work environment. And so what these you'll see the 3 research studies down there at the bottom, and there have been more, but these were 3 that I just picked out here that basically all found the same information, but were conducted by different researchers and as you can see during different years. But what happens is that the learning program design with most of in most L&D training programs receives maximum emphasis because that's what we know the most about. And for instructional designers, that's what we know about. And so we give that much more attention than either of these other 2. The learner mindset receives little or no emphasis, and the learner work environment receives little or no emphasis. And it's only when we address all 3 of those and we're able to align these circles that we're able to achieve success and ensure that learning gets applied back on the job. So we need to address all 3 of these components. Now, what I want to do is also just briefly talk about these training transfer factors. I'm not going to go over all of them. Kamal is going to send you an ebook that I created that will overview in more detail each of the 15 training transfer factors and also align them with these 3 components. But I'm not going to go over all of them here just in the interest of time because I want to get into the actual data itself so you can see how this is used. So there are 6 learning program design factors out of the 15, and 2 examples are the program is viewed by the learners as relevant to themselves and the requirements of their job. So if the learners don't see the program as relevant to themselves and the requirements of their job, that's going to have a negative impact on training transfer. It's going to reduce training transfer significantly. And another one and the second one I put up here as an example of the 6 is the program provides learners an opportunity to practice the new information learned. So there's lots of, again, research around this, that if people don't have an opportunity to practice what they've learned, they're just a lot less likely to apply it when they get back on the job. So here's the 5 learner mindset factors. There's 5 of those. And again, I'm just going to share 2 of them. So you'll find the others in that ebook that Kamal will send you. But here are 2 learner mindset ones. Learners leave the training feeling confident in their ability to apply the new knowledge that they learned. So to the extent that learners don't feel confident in their ability to apply it, increases scrap learning, decreases training transfer. And then the learners, another learner mindset factor is that the learners remain persistent in overcoming obstacles to implementation. Because when they get back on the job, there are going to be other things that might come up that are going to get in the way and cause them, not to be able to apply the things that they learned. And what they found, again, with research is that the learners who are most persistent in overcoming these obstacles and have that mindset that we can, get around these things are the ones that are going to apply more of the training back on the job than people who aren't persistent. There were 4 learner work environment factors, and here are 2 of them. The managers actively engage learners before the program to discuss how the program will help them improve their performance. So they have these discussions before they actually send their employees or associates to training. And the second one is, out of the four, learners have an immediate opportunity to use the new information they learned. Again, lots of research on, the longer the time lag between someone learning something new and having an opportunity to apply it back on the job, the less likely they are to ever apply anything that they learned. So having an immediate opportunity is a key factor, learning environment factor that increases training transfer. So what we want to do is to take these 15 factors, and I've actually converted them into survey items. And so in the predictive learning analytics workshop that Kamal will talk about here at the end, I've created these, taken these and created survey items for you so that you can take these 15 survey items and either include them in an existing level 1 evaluation, or you can just administer them as a separate survey following the training program. So it's your choice. You can decide which way you want to do it. I've had some clients do it by combining the survey items on their level 1 evaluation. I've had others that decided to separate the two and administer a separate survey. But in both cases, what you'll be doing is administering the survey shortly after the training is over or immediately after the training is over. And here are a couple of survey items. I just took two of the items that I showed you earlier. We talked about relevancy, so here's how I converted the relevancy factor into a survey item. So how relevant is this program to you and the requirements of your work? And then the second one came from the learner mindset component, and talking about confident. And so we asked, how confident are you in your ability to apply the new information you learned in this program back on the job? So took each one of those 15 factors and created survey items like these. So then we used the survey data to calculate 5 key metrics that pinpoint the underlying causes of scrap learning. So we administer the survey right after the training is over. And then what we're going to do is from the data that we collect, we're going to be able to come up with 2 predictive metrics. One is something called a learner application index score, which I will talk more about here in a second. And the other predictive metric is the manager training index score. So these are predictive metrics. We're going to be predicting in advance what's likely to happen with the learners and whether or not they're going to apply what they've learned back on the job or not, and predict which of the managers are likely to provide active support for the training after their employee comes back from the training and which are not. So those are predictive metrics. And then we also collect data on 3 descriptive metrics. And so we're going to collect data around the training transfer component index score. So we're going to take those 3 components that we talked about, the learning program design, learner mindset, learner work environment, and we're going to actually calculate which of these components are contributing the most and least to training transfer. We're also going to capture data around obstacles to training transfer. So we'll collect data following the training program 30 days afterwards, and we'll find out from the learners what obstacles got in the way and prevented them from applying the things that they learned. And we'll show you how we do that. And then we're also going to calculate that scrap learning baseline percentage, because we need to have a measure in place so we have something to track against as we start to implement corrective actions. And you'll see how we use that and how we're able to then use that by comparing a recalculation of this scrap learning percentage and compare it to the baseline to help us still tell the story about how successful we were in increasing training transfer. So the case study is the medical insurance company I mentioned earlier, the continuous process improvement. The business objective for this training program was to improve operational efficiency. And the people that were attending the training were 74 call center employees. So these were employees that were taking calls from their customers that were calling in about whether or not they're when they were going to get reimbursed for their medical insurance expenses and so on and so forth. And so there were 74 of them that attended this training program. So here's metric one that I mentioned, the Learner Application Index scores, or LAI scores for short. And the LAI scores predict which learners are most likely, at risk, and least likely to apply what they learned in the training program back on the job. And we'll show you how we do that. So we took the survey and we had all 74 of these learners filled out the survey. So in the left column here, these are all the learners. If you count up all those numbers, there's 74 of them. And so then in the second column here on the right, this is their average score across those 15 training transfer factors. So, and you can see here at the top left, learner 30904 scored all 15 items. The response scale for the survey items was 1 to 7. And so they responded with a 7 to all the 15 items. And you'll see at the lower right, the learner 43859 responded with it's being blocked here. Let me just 3 point. Well, you can see it. It's being blocked by my, but 3 point something something. And so you can see there was a wide range of scores here, which led us to conclude that there would be some validity into doing what we're going to do next, which is clustering these learners into these 3 categories. And what we did was we took the Brinkerhoff research data and we identified the top 15% of scores as the learners who were most likely to apply what they've learned in this training program back on the job. So we're just applying the Brinkerhoff research to the data that we collected with those 15 survey items. And the middle, 65% here, were the learners that Brinkerhoff found that would go back with and attempt to apply what they learned, but within 30 days or less, end up not applying any of what they learned. And then the last group over here, the bottom 20% are the group that Brinkerhoff found that went back and attempted to apply nothing. So we now can take all of our learners, all 74 of them here, and we can identify these learners in these 2 groups as the ones that we want to focus on with follow-up materials, with reinforcement things, with micro-learning modules, with all kinds of different solutions, which we'll get into when we get to phase 2. But things that we can direct at these learners to try to move them over into that most likely to apply category. And so that's how we start to use this data to measure, monitor, and manage the scrap learning. So we can identify unique individuals here that we need to address, which typically we don't get, by the way, with traditional level 1, 2, 3, 4, or IOI or ROI data. Again, we're looking at, programs or cohorts there. Here we start to look at unique individuals. So metric 2 is calculating the Manager Training Support Index scores, or MTSI scores for short. And so these scores predict which managers are likely to provide active or passive support for the training that they sent their employees to attend. And as we all know, managers play a critical role in whether or not the people that they send to training are going to apply what they learned in the training when they return to the job. So managers play a critical role in that So that's why we wanted to identify which managers are likely to do and provide active support or passive support for the training. So in this case, what we do is we only use managers who had 3 or more direct reports that attend the training. So in the left column here, there we go. So the left column here, you will see there were 12 managers who had 3 or more direct reports attend that continuous process improvement training. And so in this column, you see the managers. And in this column, you'll see the number of direct reports each manager had. And you'll notice nobody had less than 3, because unless they had 3 or more, they weren't included in this analysis. And then what we did was we took, we created something we call the manager pre-post support score. So there were 2 questions of the 15 of the factors under the learner work environment. I showed you one, which was the discussion that the manager had with the employee before sending him the training. There was also another question that asked about the how likely the manager was to have and engage them in a discussion following the training, and to talk about how the learner was going to apply what they've learned back on the job and so on. So we combined the scores for those 2 factors and then came up with an average. And so that's what you see here. So the average score on the 2 factors measuring the quality of the manager's pre and post training program discussion is this manager pre-post support score. And then we took the learner application index scores, which you saw on that previous slide, and we created an average learner application index score. So for example, at the top here for manager 35250, who had 4 direct reports attend the training, we took the learner application index scores for those 4 direct reports and created an average score. So we added them all together and divided by 4. And so we created this average learner application index score. And we label this as the training transfer potential score. So that's what that indicates. And then to get to the MTSI scores, we simply subtracted the learner application index score from the manager pre-post support score, and then put these in numeric order like you see here. And any manager, and any manager who had a positive difference, in other words, where the manager was providing support, active support that exceeded the training transfer potential score, that LAI training transfer potential score, we labeled those as managers who were likely to provide active support for the training. And then the managers who ended up with negative scores here, we have predicted are going to provide passive support for the training. And again, are those managers that we need to work with to address their support for training, not only for this training program, but other training programs that they might be sending their employees to attend. Because we know, again, managers play a critical role. And if they're providing passive support, what's going to happen is it's going to increase scrap learning and reduce training transfer. So now we know which managers we need to focus on to make sure that they start providing a more positive support for training. So metric 3 was calculating the training transfer component index scores. And so these scores identify which of the 3 training transfer components and 15 training transfer factors are contributing the most and least to training transfer. So the way we did this is we took the scores for each of the components. So those are the 3 components: learner mindset, learning program design, and the learner work environment. We added the scores on all the factors, and then came up with an average score for that component, which you see here. And so we can see the learner mindset had the highest score and was higher than the learning program design, and was also higher than the learner work environment. But what we also want to know is, are these scores significantly different? This is interesting, just what we have here, but it really doesn't give us the information that we need to start to manage training transfer. So we want to do another statistical analysis and compare each one of these components with one another, and see if these scores, these overall scores here, are significantly different. So we compared the learner mindset index score with the learner work environment index score, and we used a statistical test called a t-test, which some of you might be familiar with. But it's easy to do. It's in Excel if you have Excel, and so it's not a not a complicated process to create these and do these t-tests. And what we found was that there was a strong, very strong actually, statistical difference between the learner mindset index scores and the learner work environment index scores. So then we also compared the learning program design index score of 565 with the learner work environment index score of 5.27. And we also found that there was a very strong statistical difference between these two using that same statistical t-test that I mentioned. And then we compared the learner mindset index with the learning program design, and we found that there was no or a very small statistically significant difference between these two scores. So what this told us then is, and what it told the client is, if they want to increase training transfer for this training program, this continuous process improvement training, they need to begin by focusing on the learner work environment and the items that make up the learner work environment, because those are the ones that are going to give them the greatest gain in terms of increasing training transfer. So then 30 days post-program, we're going to go in and collect we're going to collect some more data to come up with two more metrics, the obstacles and the baseline scrap learning. And so why wait 30 days? Some good reasons. One is it increases the validity of the scrap learning calculation, because we had that middle group of 65% who go back and make some attempt to try to apply what they've learned, but end up reverting back to their old ways. And so by waiting 30 days, what will happen is at the end of 30 days, if somebody hasn't applied back on the job what they learned in the training, there's little likelihood they're going to do it. So by collecting the data 30 days later, we increase the validity of the scrap learning calculation, which we'll show you here in a second. And it also allows for the full range of obstacles to emerge. So learners come to a training and they might be aware of some things that might get in the way and prevent them from applying what they've learned. But in many cases, they won't be fully aware of all the obstacles. And those only emerge as they try to go back and apply what they've learned. So that's the other reason for waiting to 30 days, is we want to make sure we capture that full range of obstacles that the learners encountered. And the way we collect this data is we choose a random sample of 25 to 30 program participants. And let me just say, you can do everybody. Like we had 74 learners that attended this continuous process improvement program. We could have done all 74 of them, but you get, as long as you do a random sample of 25 or 30, you get essentially the same results as you would if you surveyed everybody. So it's just a little more, efficient to not do everybody, but nothing stopping you from using everybody. And then what we want to do is we're going to ask these three questions, and we'll do either a survey, or we'll do a focus group, or we'll do interviews. There are a variety of different ways that we cover in the Predictive Learning Analytics training program about how to collect this data. The most commonly used method would be to use a focus group, but we're going to then ask these three questions. What percent of the program material have you applied back on the job? And then the second question is, how confident are you that your estimate is accurate? And then the third question is, if you're not applying 100% of all that you learned in the training program back on the job, what obstacles inhibited or prevented you from applying what you learned? So those are the three questions. And we take the answers to those first two questions, what percent did you apply back on the job and how confident are you in your estimate? And we put them into a mathematical formula called expert estimation. And for those of you familiar with Jack Phillips and his ROI methodology, he was the one that created this expert estimation mathematical formula back in the 1970s. So it's got a history. It's been used by lots of organizations, and it also accounts for, which is one of the reasons I like the technique, is that it accounts for potential errors in the estimates that people are providing you. So what we do is we account for those errors, whether they overestimate or underestimate. We factor that into these calculations. So in this case, with that medical insurance company, we started out with 25 learners that we were going to use in focus groups. And what happened is at the last minute, 2 of the learners were unable to attend the focus group session that they were scheduled for. And so we ended up collecting data from 23 of the 74 learners. And what we were able to then calculate using this expert estimation technique is that in the best case scenario, 57% of that continuous process improvement program ended up as scrap. That's the best case. The worst case was almost 3/4 of it ended up as scrap. And the most likely case, which is simply an average of the best case and the worst case, was that 64% of it ended up as scrap learning. So again, you can translate that into wasted time and wasted money to tell a story here. So the obstacles to training transfer, identifying the obstacles is only half your job. Making sense out of them is the other half. And so to make sense out of training transfer obstacles requires to take the obstacles and analyze them for themes and patterns. So you'll be looking at all the obstacles that people mentioned and trying to, using some common sense and good judgment, see how they cluster into themes and patterns. We're going to consolidate all like-minded obstacles into clusters. And then we're going to count the number of obstacles in each cluster and then place the clusters into numeric order from highest to lowest. So that's what we're going to do. I'll show you the data here right now. So this is what happened. So the 23 people, we collected all these obstacles, and these are just examples. There was a lot more that we sorted through. But what we did was sorted them into using the idea of common themes and patterns, put the obstacles that were mentioned into these categories, these common theme and pattern categories, and then counted the number of comments that were in each one of these categories. So you'll see that, you'll see, for example, here, there were 11 different obstacles that were mentioned that related to management. There were 10 obstacles that were mentioned that related to policies and procedures within the organization, and so on down the line. So it gives you a way to take qualitative data and quantify it so that you can begin then to manage it because now we have some hard data that we can look at. So I like this quote to kind of summarize this whole data collection and analysis of phase 1. So if we have data, let's look at the data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with mine. So that was from James Blankenship, who was the former CEO of Netscape. And I think that's I like the quote because I think that's the attitude that a lot of business executives we have that we work with. If we go in there with opinions, they may not say this to you, but that's probably what they're thinking. You know, if you've got data, okay, I'm happy to look at that. But if all of you, if you only have opinions, then I'm not sure you're going to change my mind, and I'm just going to go with what I currently think or currently believe. So we're now ready to move to phase 2. And so we've got all the hard data that we need. We've got the 5 metrics. And so we want to go into starting identifying targeted corrective actions to mitigate or eliminate the reasons for scrap learning. So the purpose of measuring any business process is to obtain actionable information for improvement. So that's what we're going to do next. So we're going to take the 2 groups, the at-risk and least likely to apply learners. I talked briefly about this before. And what we're going to do is to target those learners. And these are just some targeted corrective actions that not just the client that was the medical insurance company, but the other 2 clients that I mentioned as well. These were different things that they came up with that they used to target the at-risk and least likely to apply learners to try to move them over into the most likely to apply category. So they sent out email reminders to the learners. One of them created a job aid that summarized all the training content so that they could send that out to the learners shortly after the training was over to remind them of all the things that were covered. Another learner created quiz questions that they sent out on a scheduled basis after the training that were quiz questions around the content of the training. Micro-learning modules. They provided coaching and mentoring help if they're high potential employees that attended the training. Then you may want to provide with them with individual coaching or mentoring, flashcards, and also establishing a community of practice. So those are all examples of targeted corrective actions. So here were the managers. We did the MTSI scores, and we've got this group of 8 managers here who had negative MTSI scores, and we've predicted are likely to provide passive support for the training. And so what can we do to try to address their circumstances? And so these, again, are just a list of things that the different clients I've worked with have come up with. So one created a job aid, explaining what to do before, during, and after sending the employee to training so that a manager, the job aid would help them to understand what they needed to do, provided one-on-one coaching. One of the clients did a short training program that they had the managers attend to talk about what they should do and not do when sending somebody to training. And they also sent out email reminders regarding what to do after an employee returned from the training. And the other one was these components, the 3 components and the factors. And we identified learner work environment as something that we need to address. And the other thing that came out in this data, which was interesting, is you'll notice that the lowest score on all the factors was this factor on whether or not the learners acquired any new information. And so when we got this data, what we did is shared it with the client. And what they did is they said, well, why is that score so low? And we said, we don't know. Let's go out and ask some of them. And so what we did is went out and had one-on-one interviews with a handful of the learners. And we shared this data with them, the score on this, on the new information acquired. And what we found was, or what they found was, that out of those 74 learners that attended this training, there were a significant number of them who had attended previously at their previous employer, had attended continuous process improvement training. Or there were some who had taken a continuous process improvement course in school. in college. And so there were a whole significant number of those 74 who didn't need to attend this training because they didn't learn anything new. So we're creating a job aid that covered all the content of the training and distributing that to these people who already had experienced previous continuous process improvement training, could have saved them a lot of money and a lot of time, because those people wouldn't need to attend the training. So you want to check the targeted corrective actions, and you want to look for corroborating evidence. So here, when you start looking at these training transfer component index scores, and you look for things that for example, like in this example, 8 managers had negative MTSI scores, which again says that the learner and correlates with that low learner work environment score. So you begin to see how the data begins to tell a story because it begins to fit together. And so on down the line here, and focus on the lowest training transfer scores and investigate the why, which is the story I told you. So these are the obstacles. And again, because we've, because we put these in numeric order, we're able to prioritize which of these we want to start with in order to try to mitigate or eliminate the reasons that people have for not applying what they've learned back in the job. So when you look at these, management was number 1, policies and procedures, which are created by management, was number 2. And then communication, which partially relates to management, was number 3. So again, you begin to see a story starts to evolve out of the data. And so you have a much more clear focus on where you need to start addressing things if you're going to increase training transfer. And then we'll recalculate scrap learning so we can compare it to the baseline. You want to wait until guidelines for recalculating, wait until all the targeted corrective actions are fully implemented. So those things we ran through earlier. Select a new group of learners, ideally, and ask the same 3 questions. And then calculate the amount of scrap learning and compare with the baseline percentage. And then a positive difference score indicates the corrective actions you've taken were effective at reducing scrap learning. And here, this is actual data. So you can see here that the best case scenario here was the baseline was 44%. The follow on, it had dropped down to 32%. And the worst case was 64%, and it dropped down to 59%. And the most likely case was that it was 54%, and it dropped down to 46%. And then we also did a statistical test to see if these differences were significant. And what we found was that there's an 89% probability the reduction in scrap learning is due to the follow-up and reinforcement actions taken, and not due to chance. So we have some additional data that says, yes, what we're doing is working. And so what we need to continue to do those things and start adding on more things so we can begin to reduce scrap learning even further. So quick summary, the issue of scrap learning has been around forever, but what's different today is that with predictive learning analytics, there now is a way to measure, monitor, and manage it. So there's some other resources that I have out here if you're interested in learning more about predictive learning analytics. I've got my website here. You can see the URL down at the bottom, and I've written a bunch of articles about predictive learning analytics. So they're available on the website. And I've also had written a book, but ATD published this. It's called TD at Work. And you can order these from ATD. I don't make any money on these. So, and they're not horribly expensive. So I think there's like $14 or something, but it overviews the whole predictive learning analytics process. And then upcoming is Kamal's predictive learning analytics certification program. And I'm going to let him talk about that. and we'll hope to see you there. So, Kamal?
Thank you very much, Ken. It was very informative and a lot of information. I think I hope that attendees absorbed it. You are right, Ken. We are introducing a predictive learning analytics certification program in March, and we're going to announce it shortly. So you get two things. You get the ebook from Ken, and you get another discount since you register for this webinar. So if you're interested, you can email me on the info@vigilanceconsulting.com. And anyway, we're going to announce it, and we first of all we already recorded the session, so we'll send it to you. We'll send the recording to you, so you can again, those people who missed the parts of it, you can recap. And we will right now will allow some time for question and answers for a few minutes. We already exceeded 1 hour, so if you have any questions, you can raise your hand. And thank you, Hamza. If you have any question, you can raise your hand, and we will address the question to. Go ahead, Hamza. Go ahead, Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. Kamal. Thank you, Ken, for the informative and very good case study that you shared with us. Now, with regards to our environments and our clients, it's very difficult for an external consultant or trainer to go and force the managers to enforce the learning that took place. So what are the strategies that we should use as external parties? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. And I think it's different if you're a consultant working with a client and applying the methodology from if you're an internal person and applying the methodology, because obviously as an internal person, you have a lot more leverage because you can, not only use your own personal relationship with the managers that have these low MTSI scores, but you can also, if you want to go to the next higher level manager and try to get their support, so that you have a lot more options as an internal person to deal with the managers who come out as predicted where they're going to provide passive support. But if you're a consultant, you really need to work through your client. So whether your client can get you access to those or they can go talk to the managers, or whether they can get you access to the managers. But you need, whatever you're going to do, you would need to work through your client to get to them. Does that answer?
May I add something?
Yeah, thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken. It's basically managing the stakeholders. It's not easy, is it?
Yep. You're right. Yeah, you're right. Kamal, you were going to add something?
Yeah, just there was I have a client in Saudi, and they're running several training courses, and I volunteered to run this study for them free of charge as a service. So they welcome that this action from my side, and then once they finish the training course, I'm going to go there and do the PLA test on them. So this is one way if you want to try it. Thank you very much, Hamza.
Perfect.
All right. Maysoom, do you have a question? Am I pronouncing the name rightly? Maysoom? Masoom or Maysoom?
Yes, hello, sir.
Go ahead.
Yeah, do you hear me? Well, I'm not good speaker in English language, but it's okay. I try to learn more and more. First, thank you, Mr. Kane, and thanks and all the best for the vision platforms. Thank you so much for the discourse. Well, Mr. Keynes, I'm IT manager in company national of auto industry, and in my company we use the enterprise resource management. For me, I have if can the organization, I mean the vision platform can I don't know how I can say it in English. Sorry. If you can organize another course training in ERP, enterprise resource planning, if it's possible.
Kamal, do you want to have him ask the question in Arabic and then you can
No,
translate?
actually, can you speak in Arabic? I'm not sure if you can do that.
Yes, of course. من فضلك يعني سامحوني لاني ما اتكلم عربي جيد. انا من الجزائر. انا في شركه تطوير صناعه سيارات. انا محلل بيانات، لكن احنا نستعملوا يعني تطبيق اخر ل enterprise resource planning ERP. إذا أمكن يعني أنكم توفرون درس آخر يعني حول هذا مجال تطبيق تحليل البيانات في هذا
هو للأسف let me translate as much as I can. It's the gentleman.
Because sorry sir, يعني أنا أفهم إنجليزي بس ما أتكلم مليح، لكن الدرس الأخ ما شاء الله يعني أوصلنا معلومات يعني ما شاء الله. بارك الله فيكم.
ما في مشكلة. شكرا لك أستاذ معصوم. الله يسلمك.
شكرا.
The question was the gentleman is working in the automotive industry. They have they collect information in a different way, a different methodology, and they wanted to have like another webinar for the ERP, which is actually not our line of business, but sorry about that. So أستاذ معصوم يعني هذه بس مش مجالنا، بس يعني أنا آسف، بس إذا استطعت أن إحنا راح نرسل هذا التسجيل لك، فيمكن تسمع مرة ثانية وتستفيد منه وتقرأ تقرأ المقالات اللي كتبها كن. تمام؟
اوكي تمام.
أوكي.
شكرا. اسف.
لا ما في مشكلة. شكرا لك. مستر إسحاق go ahead. مستر إسحاق أمين.
شكرا أخوي كمال. Thank you very much first of all brother Kamal and Vigilance. Thank you Ken for this very informative lecture, and of course we need some more time to probably read through the book and to try to reflect on the dense knowledge that you provided to us. So I think we will do that in the couple of days to come. But I guess some of us are already ROI practitioners, and it's good to go into another area of the predictive learning analytics and going into the learning management versus learning measurement, which is, I think it's a great step to go further. My question, Ken, is how to position this methodology for those who are already ROI practitioners. How can we put them together? I mean, I know we have Ken Phillips and we have Jack Phillips, so there is a common denominator, yes. So we want to make a common denominator between the two.
And Patty Phillips.
Yes, Patty Phillips as well. Yeah. But Patty is more into learning measurement.
Yeah, and quick story, but people when I speak at conferences, because Jack and Patty are there as well,
Yeah.
and people confuse us all the time, and some people think I'm their son.
Oh, that's good.
They must be very old.
That feels you good.
Yeah, so we have a lot of fun with that, but yeah, I think, you know, I'm a big fan of the work that Jack and Patty do. In fact, as I said, when I use the expert estimation technique, I don't use it the way Jack uses it and Patty uses it for ROI, but I like the method. I mean, I've taken the methodology and adapted it for, you know, predictive learning analytics. And so, but I think that the whole predictive learning analytics process supports ROI, because if you're increasing training transfer, if the more you can get training transfer and the higher you can get training transfer, it's going to increase your ROI, because they're more likely then to affect, you know, business outcomes. If they're applying it, it's going to, you should have a positive effect on business outcomes. So I think they work kind of hand in hand. They're different, but they work hand in hand. So I don't see them as being, you know, like one against the other, or do this and don't do this. I think they can support one another.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ishaq. And Mr. Abdullah, go ahead. Abdullah Tayyib, are you there? Mr. Go ahead. Abdullah, can you raise your voice? We're not able to hear you.
Yes, thank you
Go
very
ahead.
much. Thank you, Mr. King, for amazing lecture. It will be helpful. I'm actually okay. Is my voice clear now?
Yes, yes. Go ahead.
I hope it. Okay, okay. My question is how we can use these tools and this methodology in our working as NGOs, or as organization working in the non-profit sector or humanitarian sector. And because I have experience with the UN, I discovered the learning process, and we learned a lot from it. So how we can use it, and from your experience, Mr. King, also if you have ideas about it, if you give us, it will be helpful. Thank you very much, and see you inshallah in another lecture.
Yeah, Abdullah, that's a great question. I've not, because the methodology is new. It's only been around. I actually started on working on it probably in 2017, maybe, and it's evolving, and so over time it has evolved. So none of the clients that I've currently worked with were not-for-profits, but off the top of my head, and I say this without having lots of evidence or any evidence, I think it would work equally as well for not-for-profits, because again, if they're taking people that are working in the not-for-profit organization and delivering training to them, you can still translate that into wasted time and wasted money, because if people aren't on their job because they're doing their job, and they're over here attending this training, whether it's online or in person, that's time away from the job. So I think that, it will apply equally to for-profit and not-for-profit organizations. But as I said, I have no experience with not-for-profit organizations using the methodology, but that would be my assessment would be that it would work equally in both cases.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Abdullah. Mr. Hussein Baqir, go ahead. Mr. Hussein Baqir.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Hussein.
I can thank you for the interesting webinar, and thank you, Mr. Khal, for arranging this event. I just want to know this technique. How long will it take so we can be able to use it in the actual market? And if the companies, as you know, by time they don't adapt all these methodologies by time, would it have a huge impact on the coming businesses and all this?
You were breaking up. I'm not sure I heard your question accurately. So can you say it again?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. My question is, how long this methodology will be like, we can use it like as an official tool for the learning and development techniques. And if the companies fail to adapt this kind of technique, how badly it will backfire on them?
Oh, I don't know. That's a great question. It doesn't take, you know, I mean, in terms of actually applying the methodology, generally you can do it in, you know, 30 days or so. But again, what I would recommend is that if an organization is going to decide to use the methodology, that what they should do is pick a single training program and use that as a starting point and apply the methodology to one program only, work through all that, collect all the data, do the analysis, implement the targeted corrective actions, collect the follow-up data. And so you experience the whole process with a single company, because you're going to learn a lot from, you know, what worked and what may not have worked as smoothly as you would have liked, based on that one situation. And then it can be scaled and rolled out, because the amount of training scrap learning can vary, and often does, from program to program to program. So a lot of the things that you learn with one program probably have applicability to other programs as well, but you don't know that for sure until you collect the data and you know, and start looking at the data. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that would be the way to approach it, is to, as I said, start with a single program before addressing it with you know, other training programs.
I see. I see. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hussein. Ayman,
he's had two questions. One was about the MTSI stuff, and one was about the expert estimation technique.
Yeah. So which one do you want to answer?
How about if I do this, Ayman? If this is okay with you, Kamal, why don't I just set up just a separate conversation with Ayman, and I can go through and go through these two things, because it would take a while to do it here on the webinar. And I know you guys, you know, it's getting late, later in the day for you guys. So why don't I just try to set up something with him? I'll give him my email address here, and on the next slide, I've got my email address and contact information. Reach out to me, Ayman, and then I'll walk you through using actual data and show you how to do the calculations for the MTSI. And I can also walk you through the expert estimation technique, because I've got slides for all of that. I just didn't cover it.
All right. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Yes, I think we've taken 1.5 hours. Thanks so much, Ken, for this amazing webinar. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending our webinar. And as we said, we'll send you the recording, and we're going to send you as well the ebook of Ken, which he wrote and updated lately. So thanks so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ken, again. And for the participants, have a good night, and for Ken, have a good morning. Okay.
Thank you, Kamal, and thank you, everybody. Here's my contact information, Ayman. So I see you put yours in there too, but yeah, let's connect, and we'll just set up a time to walk through that. We can do it in probably half hour, 40 minutes or so.
All right then.
So Kamal, get better, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know it's, yeah, having a cold is never good. So, but there are worse things.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I'm in good shape right now.
Okay,
right.
great.
Thanks so much. Thank you, everybody. So we'll see you hopefully in March if you join us with the certification program. And until then, keep well, keep good, keep safe. Right. Take care.
Right. See ya.
See you then. Bye-bye.